everybody. I'm Nicole.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Sarah, and together we're the co-founders of Whale Tales, a living library of cetacean stories.
Today we have a very special guest from a very special marine detective.
So sit back and enjoy as we dive right in.
That's right, everybody. If you are familiar with marine biology, especially in the Pacific Northwest, but probably everywhere, you have likely come across the marine detective, aka Jackie Hildering, aka the co-founder and Educations and Communications Director for MERS, the Marine Education and Research Society, aka one of the best interpreters I've ever seen in my life, aka amazing. So excited to talk to her.
Jackie is a marine naturalist striving to create positive environmental change. In addition to her education and communications roles, she conducts humpback research for mares and participates in whale research surveys with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. She uses her underwater photography and storytelling as the marine detective to increase awareness of the biodiversity, mystery, and fragility of life in the Northeast Pacific Ocean.
Hello, everybody. Today we are so excited to be talking to Jackie Hildering, the co-founder and Education and Communications Director for MERS, the Marine Education Research Society.
Hooray!
Woohoo! But you might also know her as the Marine Detective.
I have the absolute joy and could never have predicted that this would be what my life would be, of being able to call myself a humpback whale researcher, co-founder of an organization that is unique in that what we do as researchers directly informs education, and what we learn from our rescue and response efforts also informs education. So it really is a group where education and putting things directly to the public for positive social environmental change is what the Marine Education Research Society is about. So there, I'm one of the co-founders. We were a group of friends on the water trying to make the experience of seeing orca count around northeastern Vancouver Island way back when. I happen to have the incredibly good sense to hire some remarkable naturalists that were really dedicated to making our experience on the water, creating noise, burning up fossil fuels to make that count for the purposes of positive change. And we were on the water when the humpbacks started coming back. And I say this so often, but it was just impossible for who we were, plus some additional friends in the area, for us to look at a humpback and go, look, it's a humpback. Yeah, it's like, who is the humpback? Yeah, what are they showing us about second chances? And especially as educators, like, dear God, when you get a chance to be able to leverage the understanding of how quick human values can change and how positive that can be, because we get stuck in the sludge of like the daily things we do now that aren't good. Well, we're not shooting at orca, we're not putting them into captivity, and we actually get a chance to be learning from these giants and their importance in the ecosystem. So thanks to one of the dear co-founders, Christy McMillan, the Marine Education Research Society became a recognized Canadian not-for-profit almost 15 years ago, but we were doing work before then. So that is the Marine Education Research Society, and that is largely about whales. But for me, it's also about, like, people know that whales exist, hence the podcast, for example, and its popularity. But people do not have a sufficient appreciation of what the world of the whales is, and especially what I've come to reference as ocean blindness. The curse of our coast is that the water is dark. The water is dark because it's filled with plankton, which is more food and more oxygen and more carbon dioxide buffering and more food for giants to thrive. But the hairball of misunderstanding is that warm waters are more productive. I go to Hawaii, I could see the fishes. There's way more fishes. If you can see them, if the water's like tap water, you're not going to have more fishes. This is where the giants feed.
Yeah.
So wanting to bring people underwater, and the way that my life remarkably evolved as becoming quite late in life a diver and an underwater photographer, never bothering marine mammals because that's illegal under the regulations in Canada. But the marine detective is about literally trying to shine a light into the world of the whales and to have hopefully imagery be able to pop up for certainly for Canadians, that when they look out at the ocean, if they see a whale, that they can at least envision what it might look like below the surface to try to counter this ocean blindness. And of course, that is about ultimately about action, not just appreciation. And again, something I often say is like, how can we be the voters, parents, educators, consumers that we need to be if we don't understand how important the waters are that are lapping, like for those of us who are the luckiest, like right at our doorsteps.
And an understanding of what it takes to support these whales that we can see because they breathe air and they pop above the water and they're giant and charismatic, but they're not just here accidentally.
No, exactly. Like it is, MERS does a brilliant job of like ecosystem based education. The marine detective allows me, oh my God, so many metaphors, but allows me to go deeper with that, where it is, and possibly like the most like illustrative of what I'm trying to do is like I do find the Fish Fridays that drive adults insane.
Love
And that the kids love them. And there's some little books that I've put together. But there it was about like not wanting to hit people over the head, which is kind of my tendency. Like, oh, damn it, like this is what it looks like. Like, don't you understand? There's more life here. Instead, showing the many varied underwater landscapes. And then this is like, where's Waldo? So where's the fish in this image? And especially with children, what I hope then I'm contributing to is that when they look at the ocean, that they can generate some sort of image about what it might look like there, and that they, especially like up here on Northern Vancouver Island, territory of Kwakwa speaking people, where I can say that fish lives there and point to somewhere. So yeah, so those are the two voices, the two hats that I am surprised to have, that my life evolved this way, is humpback researcher, co-founder, communications and education lead for this freaking fantastic team and community that is the Marine Education and Research Society, but then also hurling myself in the ocean with a camera and most often with a tutu as well, as the marine detective.
It's quite remarkable, Jackie, and it is not overstating to say you have had such a tremendous impact on so many people. Personally, I remember coming out and meeting you for the very first time as a naturalist up on the east coast of the island up there in Telegraph Cove, and I was relatively new in interpretation at the time. I'd probably only been doing it as a job, as a paid professional job, for less than a year the first time I met you. And you were a huge force behind me recognizing, oh, this is something that really matters. This is something that can really impact the world, and what we do as interpreters really, really makes a difference. And I can devote my life to it. And I have. And that's a beautiful gift that you've given so many people. And you've helped so many people all over the world fall in love with even just one very little critter under the ocean that they otherwise wouldn't have known existed. My older boy, James, he's 6 now. He loves Find the Fish Friday. And he's also way better at it than me. I'm like, how is this possible when I have scuba dived before and you have not?
It's astounding. But Nicole, that really means the world to me. And it is then like you're part of the wave, right? Like it is something that I, what is it that I not fight against, but society does these odd things, right? Where certain professions are revered for whatever reason. So the energy when I say whale researcher versus marine educator tends to be really different. And that really bothers me because at least like the old school ideas about science is like you collect your data, you write a paper, uh, hopefully it gets picked up and applied to management. Like, what about actually speaking to the research and having it land where it impacts daily actions? But also, again, like with so many of these species, the messaging is so important about daily actions, but also, like, if we're not connected to the world around us, and if we do get stuck in overwhelm, which is easy, and not understanding, like looking back again, like to what we did to almost every marine mammal species as the powerful ambassadors they are for human values, we have changed. We are capable of incredible change, and to look at how that happens, right? And that is for me like the biggest educational message behind the study and understanding of whales. Yeah, is we can change, we should change, and there are forces that try to make us believe that we can't, because overwhelm and fear and despair work really well. Yeah, to make sure that there isn't change that moves that disempowers those who have enjoyed power for a very long time.
Ooh, that's hitting a little differently this month than it would have.
Yeah, I hear you, but you're
Yeah.
part of the positive wave, and we may not disappear into despair.
I think that's a really great. It matches so closely with why and the sort of rationale that we started Whale Tales with was really just connecting people and information and stories. And I mean, yeah, it's not an accident that we have been inspired by the work that Marine Detective and Mares have done over the years as well. So yeah, that's really delightful.
And a really big part of our work too, right? Like that you would have noted is it is so beautiful to have a whale tale. It is such a privilege to have a story of a whale, and you need not be close for that.
Exactly.
But that it is, it's so positive to notice a shift to where we're so so often, and you hear the joy and scarring that comes out from having been involved in whale watching for a long time, is I would get things that are so about the individual, right? Like I am so special, and this is by far the minority, but like my favorite thing is like the person like, you know why the whales are here, don't you? It's like because they've learned to come here like for hundreds of thousands of years, generation upon generation, because their food is here, because they have cultural traditions. It's like, no, it's my birthday. So
Yeah.
that is the like the what is
Yeah.
the epitome
Mm-hmm.
of the it's all about me.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so positive, so incredibly positive to note as part of this positive societal change where people are speaking for whales
Yeah.
rather than for themselves, and we're really trying to help with language that is not about the measurables, right? Like the how close, how many,
Yeah.
but like our campaign that we're striving for now, like the with the photo contest, is that if we can help people, because you need the language, that it is about how wild, and it is about measurables. Like
Yeah.
I was on the beach and I didn't expect it, and suddenly I heard blows. It was as if I weren't there, or the boat was shut off. The hydrophone was in the water. Like we would do this really often, being as privileged as we were to have the whale activity in the area that we were working, where very often they were close, where we would put a hydrophone in the water first and not say anything. And suddenly you open the ocean, like it is still to me like the power of people hearing what is below the sound trap of the ocean is such a powerful educational and more important than education, like motivating inspiring thing that we've actually returned to as the Marine Education Research Society to try to compel compliance to regulations and best practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, the knowing your place in the wild and the gift of what you get to experience does come through a lot more, I think, despite even the egocentric inclinations of social media.
Well put.
Yeah.
Well, let's focus a little bit more on what you and your colleagues at MERS have been up to lately. I think you've touched on it, but maybe just sort of like a overarchingly, what is the mission of MERS? What are your sort of like main programs? And more recently, we want to talk about some of the super exciting things that have been going on this year.
The work really is the interconnection of education, research, response, rescue, probably more common to people, and for that to leverage positive change. So with Humpbacks, and we please know that when we began all of this, there is no way we could have known the shift with the Humpbacks, the increase post whaling, because that's, emphasizing that point. We absolutely did not know what we were signing up for, and I certainly, as an educator, did not realize, like, had a gigantic ocean where I realized how much this would be about education of boaters, because of the absence of large whales. And I think people defaulted whale with orca. And if you operate as a boater of any flavor, thinking that humpbacks know that you're there all the time, that they are traveling in some sort of predictable pattern, that you'll know when they surface, like, this has already led to very, very serious human injury, material loss. So the boater education piece, where that has led to now, is understanding, like, that there will never be a holistic course provided by the government of Canada. And it makes sense. This isn't a complaint, but things are siloed between, if it's boater safety related, it's Transport Canada. If it's species related, it's DFO. But then it gets split by species. So there's all this attention for the southern resident killer whales, which is needed, but it isn't holistic. So the management measures for southern residents can actually be working against the needs for quiet for big killer whales in their hunting for marine mammals. The understanding of the risk of collision with humpbacks isn't leveraged to create more distance for southern residents, those sorts of things. So that understanding has led to us developing an online course. The content is all there with advice from yourself, Nicole, from Transport Canada, Straight Watch, DFO, including DFO enforcement, which is brilliant. But now the formatting is a nightmare, just to be honest about that. But the content is ready. So that's a huge thing. Is we also did surveys to find out, like, our education program, See a Blow, Go Slow, how effective is it really? And to our amazement, 4,000 boaters answered that survey. Wow. So that will inform our efforts moving forward. And one of those things I'll mention already is, like, not a surprise, people find it difficult. Even the boaters who care enough to fill in a survey find it very difficult to know the minimum avoidance distance, because it varies by location, species, behavior. So that's something that we can then help with, not only our education efforts, but to help, like, provide input on the regulations. But in that survey as well, what came out is that 40% of the respondents believe that humpback whales go to warm water to feed.
Oh.
So this is huge. And of course, there's the whole, like, was it the way that we phrased the question and whatever there? But it feeds right into everything that I was effusively talking about in relation to the marine detective. Is this has huge implications for our daily actions, our valuing of our coastline, this whole bias towards warm water being better, but it also has huge repercussions for the safety of whales and of boaters, because if you believe they're going somewhere else, Yeah, and not that these are big neighbors that are coming back to the same spots, that there's incredible site fidelity. Like the whales who feed off northeastern Vancouver Island aren't even feeding the same way as the whales off Campbell River, for example. Yeah, and that's like a 2-hour drive for we humans. So that is a focus that we can act on and move forward. Also finding out to our surprise that our signage works. Who knew? At any rate, so
it's a great rhyme, Jackie. It really
is. I walk past it every day.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of words on that sign because that's kind of how we roll.
They're important words, especially like we just had killer whales up here last week.
Yeah,
something
in
like
Falls
that.
Creek.
So in Falls Creek, so it's one of those things where you see down here where people are like, oh, it'll never happen here, whatever. But no, they're here. We get those random grays.
I love the urban misinterpretation of what's happening as well.
Yeah,
there's whales there. But for another discussion,
yes.
So the education piece of our work is hugely focused on that online course, which will be free. And what we're trying to do is help create, because this has to be about closing the gap between, like we can't do it alone. So much of this is about community, from data contributors to donors to sponsors, like to the First Nations whose territories we're allowed to work in, is there has to be a gap closed in understanding the whales, their behavior, and human knowledge about them. So the education piece will be refined in striving to create a culture of compliance rather than you're supposed to stay 400, 200, 100 meters away, and that people also, surprise, can't estimate what that looks like.
I don't think
but what if people actually understood all the more about why, rather than the distances? It is the noise, it is just proximity, even with your engine off, it is risk of collision, it is habituation. So we will move forward with the insights from the surveys, building community further to try to create this culture of whale safe boaters, is what we're referencing it as. And that will be the course, it'll be signage. We'll continue with our marine naturalist course, which is like the most, I think, effective thing that we do, as well as doing courses for DFO and Parks Canada to help enforcement officers and other government officials, but then, of course, also trying to be of use to First Nations as directed. But that is the building of community and amplifying the knowledge, yes, but I think even more the ethics and the wanting to do the right thing, understanding that you're either going to be a bigger force for what impacts whales and everything that they represent, or you're going to be part of being a force for good by modeling the right behavior, helping educate, reporting, using the whale warning flag. And we are attaching the whale warning flag to this big time, because we have found in its promotion that this helps people identify themselves as the good guys, as the people who want to help. And the whale warning flag is a colorful flag that was born on northern Vancouver Island when, despite the presence of 2 big whale watching boats, little boats still drove right through Orca. It's like, was this not enough of a visual indicator that there were whales here? So it operates like a dive flag. So it has to come down when there aren't whales. And otherwise it signals that there are whales in the area, and it adds to the weight of evidence that boaters should know to slow down, adjust their behavior. And again, it's hard to articulate, but what I never realized would be a byproduct, there's the actual physical use of raising the flag and waving it like hell at people as well. That's effective. But it also it helps create culture and identity. And that's hard to measure, but it is real. And that's what we'll be trying to leverage. So that's the education piece. The research piece. Humpbacks don't organize themselves in families other than mums and their first year calves, and then some exceptional social associations where 2 females, specific females, are more often seen together, for example. A lot of the social associations night if the whales are feeding during the day. So what this means is that if a whale that has extreme site fidelity coming back year upon year to feed in a specific area of our coast, if that whale disappears, Is it dead? Or, yeah, is it just somewhere else? And why is it somewhere else? So we, together with collaborators, including Oceanwise, Rain Coast Bay Cytology, we study the scars of humpbacks to then at least have an indicator of, we can't find all the dead bodies at the bottom of the ocean or the whales. And I think so many British Columbians don't realize how vast our coastline is. Yeah. It's like, you will see the dead whales. No, you will not. Have you not seen our coastline? But the answer actually is no, they haven't. Yeah. Plus, there's the vast expanse of ocean going out, right? So many of the humpbacks in trouble, the whales in trouble. There's still so many adult humpbacks that we get first documentations of. Like, what? Nobody, like anywhere across the entire migration route of this whale, has ever, to our knowledge, documented this whale. And of course, what we do feeds into like we're the leads of the Canadian Pacific Humpback Collaboration, but also feeds into the cross-Pacific effort. At any rate, we study their scars so that we can at least give an indicator then of, there is no way this can be about, we will save the whale, we will find the entangled whale. There's so many limitations that this has to be about prevention. Of course it does. And our research, like preliminary research, is that like 50% of the humpbacks who have survived an entanglement, at least one. So how many are dead at the bottom of the ocean? And then collision is way more difficult to see external signs of, like blunt force trauma. I speak from very raw experience. You may see nothing on the outside of the whale until you cut it open and see all the bruising. So that's a huge part of our work. We do year-round line transit surveys, which are a lot of fun in the winter. But that is, how are you going to scientifically have an indication of how, what the seasonality of species are, or if there's change, what is their distribution if you're not doing these very systematic surveys. The knowing who the humpbacks are and speaking for that, because we want people to care about individual whales, not look at it at a population level. So is a huge part of what we do, working together with the Canadian Pacific Humpback Collaboration. And then the response and rescue piece of it is something where the other pieces directly inform, because we want to ensure that if a humpback is disentangled, for example, who was that humpback? Did they survive? What can be learned from the disentanglements? We also have the joy of, for our wonderful colleagues at Marine Mammal Rescue, Vancouver Aquarium, releasing seals, being of use when asked to be. But it really is like we do some hands-on work with regards to rescue and response, of course, always coordinated by DFO. But things have changed so quickly with the number of not just humpbacks, but the public concern about orca, and the number of seals and sea lions that thankfully have rebounded so that mammal-eating killer whales can do better, number of sea otters, that we want to help our dear colleagues in DFO in being the center of a local node of response, because we know if people are on the water, what skill sets they have, who might be available to, if there's a dead sea otter, for example, who might be able to get it with all the precautions so that there can be learning from that. So these are all the big pieces. We're also working with grad students, looking at, this might be the thing that I'm personally the most excited about ever, is looking at eDNA. So instead of a whale or another animal having to be biopsied, which is using a crossbow to dart the whale, which can be done relatively benignly if you've got people who understand whale behavior, but way better than getting a piece of the whale is just to look at the water when the whale flukes. So we are working together with a grad student to collect those samples. And that's one of those like make my heart sing things, because it allows us to be part of the evolution, showing that there's a different way that isn't as invasive for the whales.
Oh, so cool.
That is so cool. Every time I hear about eDNA projects, I just get so excited, because it's such a novel way to be able to monitor and understand what's happening without as directly impacting what's happening.
Yeah, and it is. I think it taps into that human change piece, right? Because the humpbacks were used for like let's practice our skills to dart orca by shooting into a humpback. The data isn't even like being collected appropriately. To like this is reflective of societal like license in what we will tolerate, as well as human ingenuity in a way that isn't perceived to be like the solution to everything, but motivates things for the sake of the welfare of animals. And the messaging around that is fantastic, that we carry enough, like within my lifetime as a 61-year-old, to go from having overtly, like I can in 45 minutes I would be at BC's last whaling station on our coast, that we have gone from that in my lifetime, which closed in 1967, to then carrying enough to really look at the welfare of the animals that we study, and to ensure if the system works properly. And those of us who have the extraordinary privilege of being able to have a research license, is the research we're doing really helping the species? Because if it isn't, why are we doing it?
And or do we need to still do research in the same way that we've been doing it for 40 years?
So true, right? And part of this, of course, is we live in a petri dish of like politics and finances, and can we have tankers and whales too? So like the amount of money that's made available for research for southern resident killer whales can give the appearance of we don't know enough. This is a train wreck that's been happening for a really, really long time. We can refine the knowledge, but there is nothing new that is going to prove that those whales are really in trouble. So there is that too, right? Like the funding flows sometimes because of like certainly because of the status of the animals under the Species at Risk Act, but also there's all kinds of political things at play.
I wanted to kind of take a step back and really just actually talk about the humpbacks that you have up in there. So you were in Port McNeill, so Johnston Strait. Can you tell us about like your unique stuff? You mentioned how they're feeding differently than they would in Campbell River. How many do you normally get back every summer, kind of like ballpark? Because it's not obviously an actual population, but it is a specific area with whales doing specific things.
So the point of population that I'll jump in about there, that's part of our work too, and how DNA can help. Because currently humpbacks are perceived to be one population, North Pacific humpbacks, and they are managed as such in Canada and are perceived to be a species of special concern. And it would be hugely different if they were recognized, some of them as being threatened or endangered in terms of research conservation efforts and their survival.
Let's make everything a new species.
Like they as soon as they cross the border into the US, they are recognized as being different populations. And considering that almost all of them go to different breeding grounds, there's a pretty strong argument for that. So making very clear, first of all, that's part of our work too. There's Central American humpbacks here, there's Mexican, there's Hawaiian, and Christie's research supports the further you go to the north, the more likely they are to be Hawaiian. Central American ones are in the shipping lane off Southwest Vancouver Island. So the known ones at any rate. So the humpbacks that we know the most about, but again, like our research area is beyond just Northeast Vancouver Island, and the efforts of what we do are across the Pacific. But these humpbacks, again, Christie's research, is they are predominantly specialists in lunge feeding on juvenile herring. So lunge feeding on juvenile herring, big mouthful, go through it. You have to be able to get fat fast when you're a humpback or any other baleen whale, because you are going to warm water where there's little to no food for you. So gray whales, fin whales, minke whales, humpback whales, they have these lives where lose a whole bunch of weight, up to 50% if you're a nursing mom. Humpback, and then you got to come back and just make sure this is an efficient process. So I emphasize this because it supports the idea of having areas where you know the tides, you know the prey, you know which feeding strategy you can use. Not that humpbacks have only one feeding strategy, but for example, on the whole inside of Vancouver Island, that'd be a really crap place to group bubble net feed.
Oh.
Yeah, where there's the same humpback generally that come back year upon year, work together as a team and create a net of bubbles to capture prey. It's not to say that individuals don't do it on the inside of Vancouver Island, which is mind-blowing because it means that they're not only finding the prey, they're judging which strategy works, which is based on if it's slack tide or a back eddy. So amazing. But group bubble net feeding beyond the end of Vancouver Island up into Alaska. So these humpbacks predominantly lunge feeders off northeastern Vancouver Island. And if you're lunge feeding, you can be doing it at depth, but it sure helps if the birds are also going after the juvenile herring, because then they're concentrating it at the surface for you where it's easier to trap the feed. Birds feed during the day. So in areas where there's a lot of lunge feeding going on, you're going to have the world of those humpbacks be where they will be really directed at feeding during the day. And then most of them are then socializing and resting at night. And you can see where this is going because it has huge conservation implications. Where around Campbell River, and this is supported by the work of one of our research associates, grad student Joanne Moreau, is that the research that she has done in different areas of the coast supports that the whales in the Campbell River, Comox, Texada area are more likely feeding a level lower in the food web, possibly krill. And krill does not want to be around during the day when there's birds.
No.
Krill has a choice. If there isn't an upwelling, krill is going to come up at night. So those humpbacks are going to be largely feeding at night and then resting and socializing during the day. So this is how, like, there's still so much that we need to know. But like from an education standpoint, what is so incredibly important to appreciate is this is where the whales feed. They have to get fat fast. You have neighbors who are coming back. It's not just a humpback. It is, they might have second and third favorite places. They have multiple feeding strategies potentially. But this is about the incredible importance of these animals in their migrations, where when they lose weight, they are actually fertilizing the warm water with their urine, importing the nutrients from British Columbia. So against exactly what it's so on its head from what the average person realizes. So these whales are incredibly important on a global scale as transporters of nutrients. Our coast is incredibly important for them to feed. They are reducing carbon. This whole idea like, oh, the whales need us, save the whales, like save the damn humans. They are helping with that despite all our bad choices, because what they're doing here is, and I know I'm being rapturous around this, but in terms of the beauty of evolution and how things fit together so remarkably, like, why do humpbacks migrate? Well, it's better not to have your baby when there's mammal-eating killer whales around. But also a byproduct of that is the transport of nutrients. And also these whales, and having a second chance with them, is nature's design is that they have to poo at the surface. And as long as you've got a lot of current, this is fantastic because it means they are fertilizing the very ecosystem that they are part of. So they like seeing whales in isolation is like insane. No, that whale that you see and like, the whole, like, how close, how many, like, how about that whale is helping you survive because it is increasing ocean productivity, the amount of food that there is. It is helping there be more oxygen because the algae are, again, as long as things get mixed up, and they are absorbing carbon dioxide. And there's one study that puts forward that every great whale in its lifetime is worth the equivalent of about 30,000 trees. And that also includes when it dies and falls to the bottom of the ocean with the carbon in its body.
And I know we talked about it earlier, but I think another important part of, like, these are our neighbors and they come back year after year. It's not just random humpbacks that are coming back. It's the same individuals that come back year after year, the same culture of these humpbacks that come back year after year. Like, it's not, they don't just randomly pick where they're going to go feed in the.
No, and it is, right? I don't think that the average person, until you say it, realizes that, oh, I think I thought that. It's like this idea that you're saying so well is like that whales are blundering around the coast
Yeah.
into food. It's like, no. And this is part of
very
like
intentional.
my awakening, like my own awakening in what kind of educator I was and the privilege of learning from one small piece of our coast. And I don't think I'll be able to articulate it to the degree that I want to. But to move from a place like, again, for us, it was initially trying to make the experience of seeing orca count. But when you really get that orca family, generation upon generation, for hundreds of thousands of years, has been going after that run of salmon in that river that is fertilizing those trees, because nature has ensured that salmon die to bring their nutrients to the very places that they were born. When you start having that kind of interconnected understanding of what is happening, and that is like the extraordinary privilege of what I wish I could articulate better, is this is not about individual species. This is about wonder and marvel that spans time and perfection and interconnectedness in a way that makes me as a human feel appropriately small, which is what I want.
But it's true. It's one of those things, and it's hard even when you're so focused, like you were saying, so focused on seeing the animal, getting the photo, posting it on your social. And I know that's what a thing I do every day because that's what we do. But it's still, you got to take a step back and look at what's actually happening.
And the bigger purpose of it's not just a random thing for likes. It's, sharing for
Tell
engagement
story,
and understanding
people.
and connection and joy and appreciation of the world around us.
Yeah. Maybe, we want to talk about the big exciting stuff.
Yeah, you traveled this year, Jackie, for something pretty exciting.
Yeah, the way you never know your life's going to evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the travel that I did was justified. This is very important to me. The carbon of going. We also lived in the Netherlands for years and also had a baby I had to meet in England. But astoundingly, and this is thanks to Conger, the humpback whale. Like in our evolution of like never knowing how many whales, how much education would be needed, the need for research. It was also, it happens to be that it was me with dear friend Tavish Campbell, who one day was on the water. I was like, what the hell is Conger doing?
Mm-hmm.
There he was.
Weirdest looking thing. Yeah.
Oh my God. Like just hanging there with his mouth open. Yeah. And we clued in pretty quickly. This was a whale that we had already known for several years. But we knew pretty quickly that this was a feeding strategy. It's Christie's brilliance that actually did all the work around the research for this. But yeah, Conger was one of the first two whales that we documented undertaking this novel feeding strategy that the whales sometimes use under very specific circumstances. And I can come back to that. But that led that research that Christie published. And the interest in that led to the BBC, and it led to Planet Earth 3, and it led astoundingly to 2 seasons of filming where for us very clearly it wasn't about, this can't just be about trap feeding, like that's novel, that's great, but how does this matter? And we learned a lot because you ultimately can have less influence than you think in what ends up in the content.
Yeah.
But it's led to Sir David Attenborough narrating the name of Conger, which kind of makes our brain explode. That a whale that we nicknamed are being able to learn from these whales that we had a global platform where the trap feeding, great, novel, interesting, but it also led to the humpbacks of this area and the beauty of this area, speaking to the importance of whales, because ultimately it was the fertilization and carbon capture that was the big message, and that yeah, we need whales for our own survival.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, so I went over for the filming a year ago, which was like extraordinary.
I can't. It's like, what nature lover, regardless of what your niche of nature is, doesn't imagine and fantasize about what it might be like to be part of David Attenborough's anything.
I didn't meet him for the, like, I think people presume that I did. I did not have the privilege of meeting Sir David, but the hilarity of this, and I thrive on hilarity, is that in every single presentation I do, I have the line, excuse me, I need to pause for a moment, because as a biologist, I have the contracted obligation that I have to show you a Sir David Attenborough video. So here you have the voice of God, blah, blah, blah. Like, I've been doing this like for so long.
Yeah.
And then I'll never forget the epic moment where Christy and I realized, like, oh my God, I think it was a protective mechanism as well. Like, because if you think about, I was the boat driver around these, it was so remarkable too, because I don't think we realized, and I don't want to sound boastful around this, and hopefully my character shines through in that regard.
Yes, absolutely.
But we did not realize is how exceptional it is to know the whales like we do. So that the producer chose us is remarkable, because you could certainly go to warmer places. You could go to where there's even more whale density. But it was our ethics, because we got asked things like, can we swim with the whales? No. Can we do this? No. You have to get a license through DFO, like, and that actually brought us together. I thought I was pushing away our chance, but also the fact that we could say, that's Hunter, under these circumstances right now, Hunter will likely breach. And that you don't realize until there's somebody who wants to film these things, or that we could anticipate the circumstances under which trap feeding would take place, which is certain individuals. They have to be able to recognize what are now 34 whales that we know have learned this, at least 34 whales that have learned this from one another. But you have to know who the whale is, but you also need to know the circumstances, which is very much being tuned into what birds are doing. And that you need birds to still ball up the fish, but then the humpbacks, the ones who have learned to do this, will trap feed, not rushing through as lunge feeding requires, which costs lots of energy. So of course you want to get enough energy in your mouth to justify that. But instead, this novel feeding strategy is to hang there with your mouth open, so low energy, and doing that because there isn't the same density of feed, and it is the same prey, juvenile herring, but there has to be a reason for the herring to make the life-changing decision of hiding in a humpback's mouth, which is the birds that they're trying to escape predation. So yeah, we learned a lot in this process about what we knew of, and just realizing the privilege of that. Like we have been learning from these whales in these territories that we're allowed to work in, and oh my God, what a motivator to try to make it count. But that that birds are doing this, a boat is doing this, the tide is doing this, maybe the whale will do this.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think about when I watch those kinds of documentaries, of just how long the the filmmakers have to sit there and like in the blinds in the weirdest kind of positions and stuff to get those. So having someone like you would just be incredible
Yeah.
for them.
And the producer was like helped us with that.
Yeah.
I love it, like that he goes, and he was an incredibly animated character. Like, you do know, Jackie, like this is extraordinary. We also loved so much, and I'm going to dare share this. Like, our team happens to be all women. And I emphasize happens to be.
Yeah, yeah.
But at one point, with Christy and I being on the boat with them for the duration of this filming, is at one point the fabulous producer looks at us and goes, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning or something, and he goes, "You're both women."
Yeah.
That's not reject. It's but I love so much that for him that was like an absolute like not thing, that we researchers, we boat operators, we who had their lives in our hands, were happened to be not male, as an aside.
Love that.
Love it. Love it. He hasn't spent a lot of time with marine biologists, maybe.
No, but it is we part of the big development this year, Nicole, I think that you were alluding to as well, is like we used to have access to a bigger boat. We now have one again, Megaptera, for the species name of the genus name of humpback, which means big wings, which I personally love because it suggests bringing people together, but also slapping them in the head with your giant pectoral fins if you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also sneakily teaching them Latin.
Yeah. The boat sitting in front of my house on the trailer, it was extraordinary how many people want locals. Like, it was wonderful to see the interest in beautiful Megaptera, but it was also the offers of people to drive our boat. Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Want to dig through piles of data, like deal with all these other things.
Yeah, the less glamorous side.
Yeah, we of course get the other side of that too. But yeah, upcoming projects, the community support that was evident through the campaign to help float our boat. It needed adaptations to be even more seaworthy and safe for operations. Was so incredibly moving. Everything from somebody seeing that there wasn't radar on it and deciding that's it. We got to make sure they have enough money for the radar. Like, my grade 2 teacher gave money. Wow. I could start sobbing here, and that's just like me as one member of the team. Extrapolate this across all the members of the team, and I cannot say enough. Like, we, there's some of us that can say that we are, the staff of the Marine Education and Research Society. But holy crap, is this community. Like, it is again, like data contributors, where if other people are on the water, and it is about specifically the idea of a humpback outside the minimum avoidance distances, like, we don't have to be out there creating noise and fossil fuels. And wouldn't it be lovely if you knew who that whale was? To people choosing to buy from the ocean store, people who do the course because they want to help the marine naturalist course in order to amplify messaging. So yeah, really wanting to take like a moment to, for people to reflect on like how much of a difference it makes to us, not only to get the support, even if it's just in air quotes, just sharing like podcasts like this, for example, like sharing the messaging you believe in. But yeah, it really is about community. But the timing of having that vessel means that we have a better platform. Even though we filmed with the BBC on my little 17-foot amazing little boat Fluke, but Megaptera means that we've got greater safety, greater range, where we can go back up to the Central Coast, over Cape Caution, expand to the west side of Vancouver Island, where we hope to also help increase knowledge gaps about gray whales as well, where the eDNA work can be done much more easily, collecting big buckets of water and filtering them out. And then also like flying drones, which offers, and which drones can only be used under research or filming license. Oh my goodness, the insights that provides, like it's directly has informed, together with collaborators, our SCAR study, and but also allows us to get insight into behavior. And that actually, there was a lot of drone filming that happened with the BBC, and it just became clear, like there were, there was so much that we were missing by just looking at surface level. Even though it does turn out that to estimate entanglement, looking at the humpback's tail stalk from the water is more effective than looking by drone, because by drone you can't see the wrap, and often the visibility of the water here doesn't allow a good perception of scarring either.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we talked to Whalewise, who work out of Iceland, doing scars from above with their drones. But I guess I didn't really think about the water quality, but that makes a lot more sense that they can see more because it's different water, different humpbacks and different behaviors and all sorts of stuff. But
and it really is the wraps, like in our, again, we're all in evolution, and what we learn. For me, a big eye opener was like Argonaut, a whale that is here with like incredible predictability, like near Telegraph Cove. And he's got like this scar, but it's very clearly a wrap scar around his tail stalk, so the area before the fluke of the tail. Like, when the hell did you get entangled? Right? And you wouldn't be able to see that from the drone perspective.
Was there anything else, Jackie, sort of in our main discussion before I sing you a little song and ask you some questions, some more segmented questions, that you wanted to share, either about MERS specifically or about kind of what keeps you going in this line of work?
Yeah, I think what I do want to share is, I think whale tails, when you shared the questions, and it's like, tell a whale tale. And I realized that the first things I defaulted to were actually very sad things. And I think that is a dimension that I want to offer to the audience is, I don't know, like glorified ideas of whale research and whatever. And like, so importantly, that it is about them as ambassadors for the ecosystem, making it count at a very concrete level, which I'll come back to. But I didn't know I would be signing up for things like trying and doing a very poor job of it to wrap a rope around the tail of a dead humpback to try to secure her body so that we might learn what the cause of death was, and that was a whale we knew when she was alive, and that the necropsy revealed that it was blunt force trauma. And so that in who we are, it is the breadth of it is that very thankfully a local community member contacted us so that we could make sure that her body wouldn't flow away, and then making sure that her body wouldn't turn into a monstrosity in the media, to speak to who she was, and again as an ambassador for the threats that we, all of us, are impacting to some degree, have influence on to some degree. Incredibly raw, quite literally, was spending hours trying to identify the humpback whose tail was severed by entanglement this year, who we nicknamed Catalyst because we didn't want it to just be a humpback, and we couldn't manage it. We couldn't match it, our whole efforts, the collaborative, to who this whale was. But to find yourself there for hours trying to figure out who this whale was, to try to make it count even more, like, look, this whale was entangled long enough, with enough, and apparently never reported as being entangled. This has to be about prevention. But those sorts of, and then doing a presentation afterwards and full on breaking out in tears when talking about Catalyst, and which I have no problem of people knowing or seeing, because that's the reality of this. Like, these are whales that we know their importance. And this is not just us as researchers, it is the enforcement officers who try to work within the system to save them. It is ecotourism operators. It is, you know, the people who see the whales in front of their homes. What is it? How to say this is, it's motivating, and it's also hovering over the pit of despair. It has to be that we make what we know count, and count in really concrete ways. So you ask of what motivates. I think the inclination is to default to like the positive stuff and how amazing it is that trap feeding, BBC, watching the next generation of researchers in the Marine Educational Research Society take their place, like all that positivity. But there is also the knowledge of what doesn't work. There is the knowledge of the deep, deep knowledge of the forces that impede change that would not be that difficult to remove. And you get caught in that space between the joy, yes, but also the weight that it has to count. It has to. And that again comes down to people and how. So I'd love to go there.
Yeah.
Is truly, dear listeners, this is not me trying to burden you with additional social or environmental problems, but the whales, and you caring enough about them to listen to this podcast, they are ambassadors. They are ambassadors for the health of the ecosystem that we depend on. They are ambassadors for so much life below the surface. And they are also barometers of our value systems. You clearly care about them. How does that translate into your life? And what works for the whales also works for the survival of our own kind and the future. And what are those things? Like, very concretely, a life that isn't directed at perfection, but in understanding. Like, let these whales be the additional motivator to reflect on consumerism. And again, not anti-consumerism, but to reflect on, like, I literally carry like the thoughts of these animals with me when I make voter choices, when I make consumer choices. And it is not about perfection, but it is about less. It is about less consumerism, less from far away. Like, why? Can we please not do that? That we are directly influencing through voter choices, consumer choices, educational choices, where boats are, how many there are, how big they are, how much carbon is put into the environment and how we consume energy. Yeah, how much noise there is. These are all things that, not to depress people, but to motivate. Do it for the whales.
Before we continue with the rest of the episode, we want to take a moment to tell you about how you can support our podcast and everything we do at Whale Tales.
You can join us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/whaletales. You can join us for $1 a month at the porpoise level, $5 a month at the dolphin level, or $10 a month as a whale level patron.
Each level comes with a variety of perks, including voting in polls, thank yous, access to extra interviews or extra stories that our guests share, producing your own fun flipper fact, and extra podcasts if you just can't get enough of us in your ears. The December extra Patreon special Whale Tales Watches podcast is, wow, a doozy. It is a combo tag team. There's a better word that the internet uses that I can't think of right now when like two things become one and it's not...
Spice Girls.
Spice Girls?
Collaboration.
That one. A collab. That was the word I wanted to try and sound hip. It's a special collab. What it is a special collaboration between Charts and Hearts, an excellent podcast run by two of the most excellent people in the world who may or may not also be co-hosts of this podcast, and Whale Tales Watches. And it's about a rom, heavy on the rom, sort of low on the com, and holiday and marine biology, very low on all of those things. Hallmark movie that's not called Sealed with a Kiss.
Nope. Boo. This episode will be free for all of our patrons but you can listen to it on Patreon. Yay this is your Christmas present. Hooray!
If you aren't able to support us financially, you can still join our Patreon and get updates like the free Whale Tales Watches episode, but you can also do things like leave us a rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice. This will help other people find the podcast, and you can also tell your cetacean-y, science-y, podcast-loving friends all about the podcast and everything we do at Whale Tales so that they can follow along too.
You can also follow us on social media at whaletales_org, or you can send us your feedback anywhere in any capacity so that we can keep making the podcast even better. So one of the things that we do in this podcast, every episode, Jackie, is we ask folks for a fun flipper fact. That's my little song. And this is meant as sort of like a hook, as it were. So maybe our listeners are listening to this podcast and, you know, our hope is always that you, the listener, you continue to go out into the world and spread your whale-loving nerdiness everywhere. And an easy way to do that is with a hook of some kind. Like, hey, did you know? And then that opens the door to somebody who might not otherwise be interested in an hour-long podcast about whales to think about maybe being interested. So we ask every guest who comes onto our podcast, what is one of your favorite fun flipper facts?
The fun flipper fact number one is about feces, which I've already like, and no surprise, my fun flipper facts, say that many, many times, are going to be things that are a hook about the importance of whales ecosystem. What are they doing here? So indeed, whale poo, did you know, like, is incredibly important. Yeah, that they're fertilizing the ecosystem. You're directly, even if you live in a desert, yay whales, because of the oxygen being produced and the carbon being buffered. But also, a very fun flipper fact is that when you see white marks on humpback whales, minke whales, fin whales, those could be from cookie cutter sharks. And those bright white spots, like I still like kick into full euphoria when I see a humpback. And by the way, there's humpbacks off our coast year round. I want to address that misconception, which is really topical in December right now, which is like, no, it doesn't mean that they're staying here. It's just that they haven't migrated yet. But in the when we have a re-sighting of a humpback, the humpback's skin can tell you, without even looking at like how fat that whale is or not. But if they have bright white circular marks on their sides, we don't have cookie cutter sharks. They're in warm water. So that is testament evidence, empathy for the whale. Like we complain about horseflies. How about like cookie cutter sharks biting into you? But it's amazing to me, like a lot of even people who like work in ecotourism do not realize the opportunity of going, see those white marks? That shows that whale has traveled an incredible distance to a place where there are cookie cutter sharks. Yeah, that they are back in this area. Those marks will fade over time. We also study minke whales, And this was part of a paper that we did that supports that minke whales migrate, is because they have those marks. And there are similar marks from lampreys, and you have to be able to discern the two. But yeah, for the general public, woohoo! That whale has come back, has been bitten by cookie cutter sharks. And why would they leave where the food is? Yeah, and go to where there's little to no food for them, and the possibility of being bitten by a cookie cutter shark, which is annoying, and also like astounding species, less chance of predation by mammal-eating killer whales. Not that they're not there, but the orca don't migrate.
That was a great fact, and also so Christmassy.
Yeah, but please emphasizing that as well. Like,
yes, definitely.
Our colleagues in Alaska have shown that there's a very small number of humpbacks that may not migrate. But what we are seeing here on our coast, so far, we have not proven that any, and by we, it's the great collective of people providing ID photos, the humpbacks that are still here, and there's a significant number still in December off the coast of BC, are those who have yet to migrate to Hawaii, Mexico, some of them to Central America, and that because some of them come back earlier, they have staggered migrations, you end up having humpbacks year-round off the coast of BC, means year-round vigilance, year-round data collection, and there might be a very few, and there is no support for like what age class or whatever that is, because you've got to go learn things like related to mating is pretty important, even if you're not of reproductive age. But this, whales in winter, completely normal, humpbacks in winter, and some of them just leave really late. They're still bulking up here.
Yeah, and it speaks to, again, the things we've discussed before, especially with humpbacks here, is that they've only been back for not even 30 years. And so we don't know, like, we know what happened before, and we know what we've seen in the last 25 years. But we didn't have that photo ID, obviously, from the whaling past for any of that. So we don't know. They were here all year, but again, different whales.
But they weren't here all year.
They weren't here all year. Exactly. And that's the other thing. They weren't here all year. Maybe they were anecdotally, like, we don't know. And it's a new thing that we have to learn with all of the changing ecosystem.
Yeah, but emphasizing the importance, because I'm afraid that might be a window to thinking like, so some of them do stay.
No,
it might be a very small number. You've got to go learn the ropes to pass your DNA on, and undergo, like the example is like another whale where the that was an ambassador for this, and what we know also speaks to the importance of these North Pacific wide collaborations is Moon the humpback, who was seen in Hawaii. Her whole spine twisted, not able to move her tail, and only swam like breaststroked basically the whole way down using her pectoral fins. And if there wasn't other knowledge from BC about Moon, it would have been left as a big, like, where did this humpback come from? Mm-hmm. Were they born with a genetic defect with the scoliosis? But because our colleagues on the coast, North Coast, knew the whale, it's like, no, she didn't used to be like this. She was likely hit here of our coast, because it's human nature to also want to blame somewhere else. Nope, that probably happened off the coast of BC, very, very likely. And the drive to migrate was so strong that she still migrated from northern British Columbia and arrived emaciated. And then we strived in the media to make that count for the threat of vessel strike, but also, like, people, of course, want to believe that she'll make it back. Mm-hmm. No, she won't. It's because the food is here.
Yeah, I was going to mention gnarly, but that's a much less sad story so far anyway. But we do, like, there was just new photos from the 80s, I think, in Mexico of his fluke without his, we don't know the sex, without the wave in it. So it's one of those things we don't know what happened to that fluke, but it wasn't always like that.
But very much to your point, Lindsay, like the ability, like how people care about whales, their attitudes to whales, and the drive to make that count is much greater.
Yeah.
But there also is, like, we're enabled now with an algorithm. It used to cost us, like, we were doing doing this late at night, like off the sides of our desks, that take us an hour to ID a humpback. And we don't just, emphasizing too, we don't just ID by flukes. We ID by mouths. We ID by dorsal fins. We're moving on to pectoral fins. And happy whale is then the cross-wide Pacific ID effort that our work and that of the Canadian Pacific Humpback Collaboration feeds into. So any sightings that we get from our community feed into that as well. And now we're helping Happy Whale to have a better dorsal fin algorithm. So human ingenuity is also allowing, there are concerns, of course, that it's like, oh, who studies humpbacks? Oh, it's an algorithm. It's like, nope.
No, there are people behind that.
Really dedicated, hand-waving human beings like those on Northern Vancouver Island.
Well, also, you gotta, just like back with BBC, you gotta know when they're gonna fluke, so you can get the photos anyway.
But so many don't fluke.
I know, they're so tricksy, those whales.
Some of them, they are individuals, and like,
who just
again,
never
like
go.
that could never, the privilege of learning from them is that above all things is like, a humpback is not a humpback. It's not a humpback. These are individuals.
Well, Jackie, we have been so privileged to have been gifted some of your stories by yourself to our library prior to today. But it is probably my favorite part of each podcast episode. If there is an additional cetacean encounter or whale tale that you have yet to share with Whale Tales that you would like to share with us and our listeners today, we would be ever so grateful to hear another one of the really moving or just unique encounters that you have been so lucky in your life to have.
What comes to mind is an encounter that absolutely just brought me to my knees sobbing. And it was with Casey, a humpback that I nicknamed Poorly years ago because it was behavior rather than design. But Casey, one of the first humpback calves we ever had the joy of learning from, his mom is Houdini, was born in 2002. And this moment that I'm thinking of was, there were two humpbacks together. They were really active. It was early in the spring. And I recognized, that was in 2011. So Casey would have been 9. And then I just had this moment where it hit me. Like, so often it's about like, make sure you get the photo, operate boats safely, like all those things. But it hit me to my core. It's like, oh my God, I've been photographing this whale for 9 years. And we know that he goes to Hawaii. He's made it back. This is a whale we've known since the first time he made it from Hawaii and learned to feed. And that we know that he was hit by a boat, and very likely in our area, and that he'd been entangled once. And it was suddenly like, it never works well to try to articulate emotion, right? But it was just this wash of, oh my God, like, this is what life is letting me do. And then the other whale that was associating with Casey could not have been like a more distinctive humpback. Has all kinds of white markings on its side, even was like going, is this a gray whale? Like initially from a distance. And it ends up being an adult humpback that had never been documented before, now nicknamed Stingray for a shape on her tail. But so that encounter, again, so often it's about output, like having to get the data. And life luckily let me have that moment of realizing this trajectory that we are on, and that it was motivated by something as beautiful as, oh my God, I'm going to cry. Like, who are these whales and how do we make it count?
Thank you for sharing.
You're so welcome.
So yes, I think that was a beautiful way to end discussion. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, I just, again, gratitude for hanging in there. in doing this, and also like such a gift for me to realize how much I've enjoyed this, in being able to share, and like and Nicole, the gift of what you said as well, right, about because I don't think any of us know, right, like you follow a path, and it's rare that you actually get to know how others join along the way.
Yeah, I think it's really important to share that with the people who've impacted your life.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to...
We would love to hear your thoughts on this or any episode, so please visit our website, whale-tales.org, and find links to our social media handles of all varieties so that you can drop us a line.
You can find Mares on Instagram at Mares Society, that's one S in there, and on Facebook at Marine Education and Research Society. And you can find Jackie on Instagram and Facebook at The Marine Detective.
You can head to our website to subscribe to the podcast, learn about supporting us and becoming a patron, and check out almost 1,500 whale, dolphin, and porpoise stories.
Wow, so many! That's whale-tales.org. Tales like the story, not tales like the animal.
And if you've seen a cetacean, we would love to add your story to our library. You can click the share link on our website. You can contact us on social media at whaletales_org, or you can email us a voice memo and tell us all about your incredible cetacean encounter.
Finally, we want to acknowledge that we recorded today's episode on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples and the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, as well as the homelands of the Tsawwassen First Nation.
Thank you all so much for being here. We hope you have a whaley great day.